Greetings, karibuni, habari gani, ninatarajia mko wema nyote. I hope you're all doing well. That is our language of unity, Kiubuntu, erroneously known as Kiswahili. Why do I say erroneously known as Kiswahili? The term Swahili was a name given to us by the Arabic colonizer. So they get to the Omanian Empire, gets to East Africa, and they point at us, they see us on the shores, and they call us I forget the original Arabic word, Sahel. So these are the people, and we end up taking on that name. So we're not children to be named. We are a sovereign people. We are a people with our own sovereign power, and we can name ourselves, which is why we are saying to hell with the name Swahili, and we're going to rename this language of unity, Ki-Ubuntu, which means the language of the people of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is our common spirituality. The term Ubuntu is coming from the Nguni peoples, the Nguni nations, but we're going to pick one. We can't pick the multiple versions of African names for this way of being that is common to us all, our spirituality, right? So we pick Ubuntu, and we all agree because we are all one people, and we all embrace each other that this is the one we'll pick. It does not minimize who I am. So, and it's very intentional that on top of that, we're saying Nsi Ya Ubuntu. So Nsi being, now I'm referring to the name Africa, Nsi being land, Ya being of, which is Kiubuntu, land in Wakongo, I should say, Ya being Kiubuntu, and then Ubuntu being of the Nguni nations. So that is, and then so the language of these people, the people of Ubuntu, our common spirituality, African spirituality. Now I'm using that term African, but Kiubuntu is Kiubuntu. So that is what we are going to call Swahili moving forward, instead of Kiswahili, Kiubuntu, for those reasons. And so, yes, we speak it as much as we can. We teach it, we share it so that more of us can speak it. And I will speak to that. Our subject today actually covers that important part, our language of unity. So I'm going to start by reading a few parts of the book, Africa Must Unite by Kwame Nkrumah, because I thought this was a great way to set our conversation, just in case some of those people who call themselves Africans but are not Africans may be confused about what we're talking about when we talk about African unity. And also because I've seen a lot of you accommodating them and their nonsensical excuses for their right to be called African. Nonsensical, 100%, because of how they ended up in Africa. This is not a hate speech. This is not a lack of tolerance. This is making right what is wrong. All right. I am now reading from the book. I have publicly, this is chapter 1 and 2. These quotes are from chapter 1 and 2. I have publicly stated Ghana's position towards Algeria. We supported the Algerian nationalists publicly. The argument that the European settlers had made Algeria their home and regarded themselves as Algerians is irrelevant. If they had been truly patriotic Algerians, they would not have opposed the Algerian nationalists. They would not have killed and terrorized and broken the provisions of the Franco-Algerian peace agreement. To the African, the European settler, whether living in South Africa, Kenya, Angola, or anywhere else in Africa, is an intruder, an alien who has seized African land. No amount of arguing about the so-called benefits of European rule can alter the fundamental right of Africans to order their own affairs. In the areas of settlement, the Europeans, in order to buttress their domination and entrench their economic hold, alienated the land from the Africans and then raised poll and other taxes upon them in order to drive them out to work for starvation. Sorry, I have to move my page. I have multiple pages open. Sorry about that. All right, let me see how we can get this moved. There we go. Wages. They erected barriers of race to enforce segregation on grounds of the inferior social development of the indigenous people. and made this a reason for enforcing their right to rule. There is no logic except the right of might that can accept the undemocratic rule of a majority by a minority. The predominant racial group must and will provide the government of a country. The race that is in the majority is the possessor of the land it occupies, irrespective of the annexations made by a minority of settlers. It is obvious that unhappiness, friction, and fear must prevail. Must prevail when a minority settler group tries to take possession of a land or to dictate to a majority, as in the cases, I am sorry, y'all, my computer is acting, of South Africa, Algeria, and Kenya. Algeria, Kenya, or the Central African Federation. So, and by the way, I want to be clear because I'm going to move on to reading another part. But before I move on to reading another part, let's make it clear that we are not talking about the United States of America. They cannot claim because the white people are the majority there now that they have the right to the land. How did they come there? Who was the majority when they came there? It was the indigenous peoples, and therefore that is the precedent we will take, especially given the unfair way in which they ended up taking over and then bringing on a majority, right? So yes, we're not talking about the United States. The United States is a colonial state. We're not saying that the white people in the United States have the right to that land. 100% not. And here we are again. Computer issues, so bear with me. Honestly. I'm just gonna go quickly to the topic, like open what I can, and we can start from there as we wait for my computer to stop acting up. And hopefully we will not get interrupted. But if we do, that's okay. We can record this at another time. We can do this at another time. Honestly. All right. Bear with me, y'all. Okay, so I had to force quit my Acrobat so that I can reopen and read the rest of the part. But let's go straight into the lecture and we can come back to that reading. So the reading, essentially, the reason I chose that part is to show that when we're talking about our African Union, when we're talking about the federated state of Africa that we're going to build, we're not talking about the white people in Africa. We're not talking about those who invaded. We're talking about us, the indigenous people. And whatever we create, whatever system of governance will not include them. I am actually talking about they have to step away from our systems. If they want to still live on the continent, they can, but they live under our rule. They will live under our governance. They will live under our laws, and they must comply with them. And if they don't want to comply with them, they can pack their bags, whether they remember where they came from or not, figure out where it is and go there. That is what I'm talking about. So, I mean, and when you think about it, it's not much to ask for. It is not cruel to say, we are the rightful owners of this land. And we're going to set rules to govern ourselves so that we can determine how we are going to, what the protocol is of interacting with each other, so that we do not have you intentionally underdeveloping us, killing us, infecting us with diseases, and threatening our food security, so that we can secure those, so that we can determine how we build our defense system, our economy, our education system. And for that reason, you have no right to step into that decision-making area of our motherland. You can stay as a guest, but you must comply. And if you don't, you will be held liable. And if you don't want to comply, please pack your bags and leave. But this is the way it's going to be moving forward. This is where we are heading. This is where I propose that we head. Bear with me, y'all. We will push through despite the challenges. We will continue to push through despite the challenges. We will push through despite the challenges. Those who grew up with me know I am stubborn, but stubborn for the right reasons. We will push through despite the challenges. I am telling you, we will. We have no other choice. I'm not settling. Being oppressed is not a choice for me. So we have no other choice. All right. So that is the foundation I wanted to set for our conversation. The fact that when we talk about what we're talking about, we're not considering white people in this future that we are seeing. We're not considering them in our governance. They're not going to have a voice in our governance. Because we are people of Ubuntu, and we know that the way we interact affects other people, they will sure be taken care of. They don't have to worry about that. They will not be exploited like they have exploited us, but they will have no right in deciding what can be done and how the rules are run. And if they have a problem with that, again, I said, if they have a problem with that, they can pack their bags and leave. I honestly urge you all to get on the same page with me regarding that. I'll be waiting. I will not hold my breath though. So we're going to start with defining what Pan-Africanism is, because Nkrumah was big on Pan-Africanism, and this is what he's promoting in Africa Must Unite. Nkrumah did not see any borders. When Ghana was the first nation in Africa to get independence. And when they got independence, Nkrumah, in his speech accepting that the Ghanaian people had chosen him as the leader, he says, yes, we are celebrating. I am paraphrasing. Yes, we are celebrating, but let's not lose sight of the fact that our independence is only a temporary fix. If the other nations around us, of people looking like you and I, are not free, we will not be free completely. And so we have to ensure that all the nations of Africa are free and liberated. And that was his Pan-African viewpoint. But also beyond that, he had come to school in both the UK and the United States. And he had seen the community, our community there. And his extension of liberation went all the way to those areas as well. So Nkrumah is not just focusing on liberation within the continent, but also our brothers and sisters who were taken outside the continent and who ended up being, for example, in Brazil, a large majority of the population there. So Pan-Africanism is a political and cultural movement aimed at uniting African nations and peoples across the globe in resistance to imperialism and colonialism. We move beyond Pan-Africanism for reasons that I will explain later in the lecture. But I will suggest that you all follow Mama Kanyisile and just Google Mama Kanyisile. You will see if the people who are hosting her are good about entering the words that will make sure that her videos pop up when you enter Mama Kanyisile. You will see videos where she has appeared, and recently she was on the Liberian, I'm sorry, my sister, I'm forgetting the name, channel, and she spoke about this, the importance of moving from Pan-Africanism to Afrocentrism. So we are Afrocentric. We are moving because we have learned better about the power of Pan-Africanism or the lack of power, of full power of Pan-Africanism. And we are moving now to Afrocentrism. Afrocentrism is our way. That cannot be taken from us. It cannot be taken from us. Pan-Africanism has also been co-opted by the CIA. I have said that before. But just because they co-opt something does not mean that we abandon it, especially if it is innately our culture. We cannot abandon them. We're just going to continue persisting, using it, and telling them that they cannot use it. And then we're going to build the defenses that are required to get them out of our communities so that they do not do the damage that they do. But Afrocentrism, what is that? It is a paradigm shift that reorients our focus on Nsi Ya Ubuntu-centered perspectives. Nsi Ya Ubuntu is Africa. Again, we rename ourselves, acknowledging the greatness of Nsi Ya Ubuntu before colonization and external influences. Afrocentrism emphasizes the reclamation of our identity, our values, our traditions, and spirituality that existed before the imposition of foreign cultures, including religion, 100% including religion. So we are taking back who we were so that we can heal and be, for those who are Christian, reborn, I guess, as true WanaUbuntu. So how we need to reclaim who we were, right? We've been infected, and I call it an infected, by many foreign cultures. You hear Africans talking about Arabic is an African language. No, Arabic is not an African language. Arabic is the language of your colonizer. Yes, the Arabs were there before the white people landed. And the Arabs very much did not teach you Arabic in a friendly way. They didn't say, oh, Ndugu, come, let's learn my language. It actually is going to help you. No, they put a gun. Well, they didn't have guns. They put weapons in front of you and forced you to take the language. You either accepted the new way that they were forcing down your throats, or you faced death. So we cannot continue to embrace that as a language of ours. We cannot continue to do that, especially if we seek liberation. So Nkrumah's key points, and we're going to go through them. So Nkrumah's analysis of Nsi Ya Ubuntu's disunity as a vulnerability. He does that a lot in the book. He shows us that our disunity is a vulnerability. Our disunity has been formed by colonial entities, by imperialists. And he starts, chapter 1 is very much about, and chapter 2 too, giving a background on how colonialism intentionally created the structures that would continue the disunity, that continue to this day, right? Borders, teaching you their languages, forcing you to learn their languages so that you don't have that common identity. And by the way, for the West Africans, and you've heard this when I speak about language in the different spaces that I've spoken about language and the importance of a language of unity. This fear that you embracing Ubuntu, erroneously known as Kiswahili, is going to take away from your culture. I want to see you react in the same way to English, French, and Portuguese. Or I'm going to be calling bullshit on you all, my African brothers and sisters. If you're not giving the same fire to fight you being taught English, Portuguese, or French, shut your mouth and embrace the language of unity. Honestly, like no tolerance anymore. We're talking about life and death. You will not get grace from me when it comes to our liberation. You will get it in subtle ways, but when I'm explaining what must be done, I don't have time for grace because it confuses the message. So here is the truth of the matter. The mental decolonizing process is not an easy one, and no one should expect it to be an easy one. Your brain has been conditioned to think a certain way that is intentionally designed to keep you in a subjugated position where you see the white man as superior to you. I'm telling you, having gone through the same process that I would hope that you go through, that I want you to go through, that moving from that position to remember who you are, that you're not inferior to them, embracing it, and doing the work that you must do to cleanse that, because it's a continuous and it takes a long time. I haven't even finished it, to completely absolve myself of white supremacy, right? The false notion of white supremacy. It is not a happy and fun experience, but it must be done. So bear with me. It is better to feel the pain of my words right now, but to reach to a destination of healing where we are all going to be speaking to each other in our language of unity and talking to each other in good words, actually patting each other on the back for being willing to go through the hard part to get to liberation. I'm going to give this analogy. I've given it before. When the animals on the Tanzanian side, this is the Great Migration, for those of you who've watched safari shows, when the animals on the Tanzania, Tanzania side realized that the grass and the foliage there is drying up and the rains are done there, and they need to move to the Kenyan side. They know there's a barrier. They have to go through the crocodile-infested waters to get to liberation. We're calling it liberation. They know if they stay on the Tanzania side during the dry season, they will die. They don't want to die. They want to have food, sustenance. And therefore they cross, knowing the risk, they cross the Mara River over to the Kenyan side and reach the liberation, right? They get the food that they need. And they keep doing this every year because they know liberation is on the other side. So you apparently are a more intelligent being. So why are you not willing? And the cost of you walking over to liberation, decolonizing your mind, is not as dire as crossing crocodile-infested waters. It is me, Nduko, telling you that you need to stop having linguistic colonization, that you need to stop having mental colonization. That when you talk of Kenya and you say Ruto must go, you are being an idiot to think that that is your liberation. It is a temporary fix that will get you nowhere. So I'm not going to sit there and be nice all the time. And I appreciate those who can be nice. I'm going to bluntly tell you what must be done, and hope that those of you who understand the importance of our liberation will be wise enough to understand that these words of me are not meant to be. It's, again, like we all say, we all embrace tough love. So embrace tough love for the sake of our liberation. So Nkrumah argues that Africa's disunity has historically been exploited by foreign powers to control its resources and impose imperialistic policies. Again, to control the Nsi Ya Ubuntu resources and impose imperialist policies. All these policies in Kenya, all these policies in Nigeria, Ghana that you're seeing being implemented are not Kenyan policies. They're not Ruto's policies. They're not Uhuru's policies. And I will name all of them so that you don't think I am favoring one over the other. They're not Kibaki's policies. They're not Moi's policies. They're not Kenyatta's policies. They are 100% imperialist policies. We have never had our own policies since so-called independence. Never. Independence was conditional, and Nkrumah speaks about it. And I like this about Nkrumah because once he's taken out of office through the coup and he settles, why am I forgetting where he ends up settling, where they gave him refuge? I'm forgetting right now. If someone remembers, put it in the chat. What country gave Nkrumah refuge? He starts writing. I don't think it's Senegal. He starts writing. And in his writing, he's actually looking at himself. He's holding himself accountable. In his books, you can see him admitting the things that he did wrong, where he allowed himself, because for whatever reason, he was blindsided. He admits, these are the areas where I went wrong, and he's admitting them, thank goodness, so that we can see that and we can learn that we should make sure we avoid those mistakes. One of the mistakes he makes, but he explains that he did it knowing it was a mistake, but he did it so that the Brits could leave, and he knew he would change it afterwards. That the problem is he realizes that he can't really change it afterwards because their claws are still in his government, was allowing them to be actively involved in the structuring of the constitution of independent Ghana, or so-called independent Ghana. So he says disunity prevents collective strength and self-determination. If we fight imperialism as Kenya, Ghana, Cameroon, let me start mentioning our other sister nations so that I don't leave them out there. Namibia, Angola, you go all the way to Western Sahara, yes. If we don't think of them when it comes to fighting imperialism, we're going to lose that battle. But if we come together as a united 54 nations of Nsi Ya Ubuntu, we have power. And if we come together under African protocol, under our own culture, under our own ways, our own laws, we will have power and leverage. And this is what Nkrumah is saying, and many others, but today we focus on Nkrumah, we must do. So he advocates for embracing Afrocentrism. We said that again, to restore Africa's cultural identity and fortify unity, which is essential to resist external manipulation and reclaim African sovereignty. The reason why I am so keen, and I have had people ask me, are you crazy? What is wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me. If you all see me, I'm doing just fine. Other than the fact that I have been retaliated against by the system and shunned and moved to the right. It's an outcast, and I'm not being allowed the freedom to find financial liberation in today's, unfortunately, capitalist system. Other than that fact, I'm doing well. And in fact, sometimes I think, despite the fact that I cannot afford the luxuries that I did because of my financial status, I sit and think to myself, I would rather that than to be sitting in the federal government office where I was working, knowing I'm contributing to the harm of my people. 100%. That was killing me inside. So in chapter 2, Nkrumah calls for political unification. So it's not just physical unification. It's not just spiritual unification. It is political unification. We must create a structure that will unite politically. We will have an agreement, a political agreement, that this is how all 54 nations are moving as far as dealing with outside nations. This is how we are all moving. as far as dealing with outside nations. The United States has a federal government, federal law that governs how they operate outside of the United States, right? New Jersey can't just go operating outside of the United States willy-nilly. They have to comply to federal law, a lot of federal law. So this is what we're saying. Those nations will not just go out interacting with foreign nations willy-nilly. They will have to follow the agreement that we come to, all 54 of us. They'll be able to independently manage the governance of their own areas, but as far as interacting and keeping our motherland safe, we will have to do it as a united force. His vision, he envisions a federated Africa with centralized power to protect its resources and achieve economic independence. And by the way, and we're getting, this is another book that we're going to be using. Cheikh Anta Diop has written The Black Africa, and he has 15 steps of how we can do this, what Nkrumah is proposing. So he advocates for rejecting foreign ideologies, I'm telling y'all, and building governance structures based on African communalism, ensuring wealth redistribution and self-sufficiency. I have Africans who tell me, oh, Nkrumah was a Marxist. Like, all right, I will give grace. Nkrumah was a Marxist at one point. Malcolm X was a thug at one point, like someone who was in the streets doing harm to community members, not caring about himself, doing harm to himself, disrespecting women, not valuing women. But he comes to a point where he learns better and he does better. Nkrumah comes to a point where he learns better and does better. And he realizes that our way is the only way that is going to get us forward. And any accommodation of the European way, any accommodation of the Asian way, any accommodation of the Arabic way is moving us away from who we are and is never going to give us liberation. So it has to be our way that we use to restructure the new united government of Africa. The centralized power would enable Africa to assert control over its destiny and negotiate from a position of strength globally. So one thing we would take away from the Europeans is this habit that they have to go to Rwanda and uplift Rwanda. By the way, just like the saying, if you see me being praised by one of our ancestors, if you see me being praised by the Europeans, you should be very worried about my character, by the way. So if you see an African nation today being praised by Europeans, you should be very worried about that leader and that African nation. That means they're not operating in the best interest of African people. WanaUbuntu. They are operating in the best interest of the imperialism, which is why the imperialist can pat them on the back, right? Because that's what they promised them. They said to them, oh, if you continue supporting us, we're going to pat you on the back. We'll give you access to wealth. You'll be able to do this and that and the other. But you cannot free your people. You cannot give your people, what do we call it? Subsidies, right? You cannot subsidize when they are in need. You cannot give them breathing room when they need breathing room. You cannot own government infrastructure. You cannot support your people in their social needs and building security when it comes to ensuring that their social needs are met. You cannot do that. But don't worry. We're going to give you wealth, so you don't have to worry. You, like someone we know, will have land in Taita Taveta. You'll have land there. You'll be able to own a seeding company, and people will use it because we're going to make sure our policies actually support you. And they go along like wildebeest. So the early successes of Pan-Africanism, we're going to look at that. And by the way, we're saying we're moving away from Pan-Africanism to Afrocentrism. The first Pan-African Congress was held in 1919, led by W.E.B. Du Bois. This, just because W.E.B. Du Bois led this does not mean that he was the only one who was running this, right? So there are many people who are not mentioned in here who were to, should be given credit for making this happen. So it was held in Paris, and it was a significant event in our history as far as African unity and fighting imperialism and colonialism. It brought together African and African diaspora leaders to address the colonial exploitation and racial discrimination faced by Africans globally. and the Congress called for self-determination, equal rights. By those of you who don't know, W.E.B. Du Bois was a descendant of Africans in the United States. So the Congress called for self-determination, equal rights, and the end of colonial rule, setting the foundation for future Pan-African efforts toward African liberation and unity. So now they have laid almost like a constitution for how we should move forward, an agreement, a community agreement. It marked the beginning of organized international advocacy for African independence and the rights of people of African descent. So Nkrumah's role in this continuous struggle to build our African unity, he plays a pivotal role in leading Ghana to independence in 1957. We all know, well, those of us who have reached back and learned the history know that. Those of you who did not know that, now you know that from hearing it from me. And so that Ghana, like I said, was the first African country to break free-ish, because it wasn't a full free from colonial rule. They have not completely to largely move away from colonial rule. Let's call it that, because they haven't broken free. To largely move away from colonial rule is how we're going to call that. So he was the leader of the Convention People's Party. He championed mass mobilization, political activism, and non-violent resistance against British colonialism. And by the way, this is something that he recognizes was a mistake he made. And he's going to say it when the book stops acting up, I'll open it and continue to read, because he says it, that liberation cannot be given on a silver platter. So again, he realizes non-violent is not going to help you. After achieving independence, Nkrumah shifted his focus towards Pan-Africanism. And he said it during independence. He spearheaded the formation of the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, in 1963. At this time, Kenya is coming to its independence, or so-called independence. The OAU aimed to promote African unity, coordinate collective efforts for liberation, and resist neo-colonialism, with Nkrumah as a key architect of it, right, of advocating for a politically united and self-reliant Africa. And clearly, those goals were failed because we haven't achieved that. So what happens? What were the failures and what were the setbacks? So the Organization of African Unity faced significant challenges, including a lack of political cohesion among member states. So you see that why it's important for the political to be a one, there has to be cohesion. Because if Kenya is operating willy-nilly in politics, it's going to affect the other nations, and therefore that unity is broken. So that was their first challenge. The disunity often led to ineffective conflict resolution, and the OAU struggled to mediate disputes and civil wars across the continent. As you can see today, the African Union is failing at as well. So, and then you had external interference from former colonial powers because they had not left, right? And then Cold War was used because America was fighting with China, which they're still using today. For example, you saw the ban on African Stream, and the reason that the United States, through their spy and representative, Secretary Blinken, I call him a spy because, make no mistake, he's not in your nations as an ambassador for the United States. He's in your nations to watch what you're doing so that he can report it at home, to watch and learn your weaknesses so that he can report it at home, and so that they can implement policies and ways and strategies to keep you subjugated. So he's 100% a spy for the United States, not just an ambassador. And so he attacks African Stream and claims that they are being funded by Russia, right? So the Cold War. And as John Perkins told us in the session we had with him, that message that Blinken gave was not for us Africans. It wasn't even to insult us, because we are insulted by it. And a lot of us have pointed out how insulting it was. No, let's stop being insulted by it. It wasn't for that purpose. It was for the American, and including the American who of African descent, of Nsi Ya Ubuntu descent. because they have now believed that they are Americans and they must look out for the independence and the safety and security of America. And so they know Russia, from being told by their government several times repeatedly that Russia is the enemy, is an enemy. And therefore, if they associated this name, people don't even know where African Stream is coming from. Some of the people who will hear it with Russia, immediately they dismiss that's a bad thing. So that's what Blinken did. And so that's part of how the Cold War affects what we are doing to move towards liberation. And this happened with the OAU. So it was largely due to the clash between individual national interests and the collective goal of unity. So while leaders like Nkrumah championed for political federation for United States, many new independent, and you see them split, by the way. Some of them still wanted to accommodate colonial involvement in their governing. And this is how they end up splitting and the OAU is broken. So part of what we are looking at, before I do that, let me actually go to where I have the AU. So let's look at the AU before I talk about part of our solutions. The AU, its successes. So we're not going to just crash the AU. So, okay, we'll talk about OAU. It's formed in 1963 with Nkrumah and others leading. And then in 2002, as this division amongst African leaders is going on, the African Union is formed to replace the OAU, aiming to address the shortcomings and promote deeper integration, which really it wasn't. It was actually aiming to accommodate imperialism, right? Not to upset the white man. Let me put it in simple terms. Those people who go ahead and say, Nduku, that's mean, that's racist. Why are you saying that? Why are you doing that? You're being racist. That is you accommodating the white man, right? I have interactions with white people. That is my business. I don't have to come here and prove to you all that I am nice and kind to white people. Just trust that I am, because I am a person of Ubuntu. But I am 100% anti people who believes in the false notion of white supremacy and use it to subjugate us, use it to build policies that are going to harm us, use it to think that they have the right to go around Africa injecting people and killing people and forcing us to do stuff, use it to think that they have the right to tell us when we should think and determine that we are subjugated and whether we should talk about it on these platforms or not. So I 100% do not support that. I 100% do not support Blinken. Blinken is my enemy. And those who sent him to do his job are my enemies. And for you as an African person, for you as a WanaUbuntu to expect me to do anything else but see them as enemies is actually, you need to go see a doctor. There is something wrong with you mentally, which is what I'm telling you all. You are colonized mentally. And you have cognitive dissonance. We are going to officially call that a disease. Cognitive dissonance, because I knew you all westernized. If you have a disease, then you have to do something about it. You all need to do something about your cognitive dissonance. It is not functional for society. It does not make you a functional member of society. You do not serve your community well when you have cognitive dissonance. Therefore, you must eradicate cognitive dissonance from your mind. So the successes of the AU. Conflict resolution, like the fact that this is a success, they have not succeeded in conflict resolution. Some conflict resolution. They have stepped in sometimes and talked leaders down from acting crazy. They have succeeded. But we see clearly, because there's a lot of conflict on the continent, they have not fully succeeded in this area. Even in economic, you know what, actually, in every success that the AU has achieved, it has only gone so far. It hasn't been a 100% success. So we can say that they've helped in conflict resolution, they've helped in trade, not all the way. They've helped in reviving African unity, embracing our languages, not all the way. Because at the same time, while they're doing that, they're allowing multinationals to come in and interfering with trade within Africa. At the same time, while they're doing that, they're allowing imperialist nations to come in and interfere with African peace and not saying anything about it. At the same time as they're doing the embrace of Ubuntu as our language of unity, they're not making it official. at the African Union. They're not saying that this is our official language. They're still upholding Portuguese, French, English, so they're not getting all the way to success. So they have a lack of enforcement power, like I mentioned. They could not get in the way of the United States wanting to kill, when you have so much, Gaddafi, right? They could not step in the way of the United States wanting to kill Sankara. They could not step in the way of the United States wanting to kill Lumumba. They could not step in the way of the United States wanting to kill many people, or holding them accountable. And by the way, I am saying the United States because, make no mistake, they are the ones at the driver's seat of this imperialism. And when one of the passengers in the front seats, the UK, French, Germany, acts out of character as far as the agreement that the United States has said that we must follow, they are checked, they're reminded by the United States. So 100% they are controlling imperialist ambitions and interests. So this is not just a bias against, this is a logical and critically analyzed criticism of an entity that is truly in the forefront of underdeveloping Africa, Nsi Ya Ubuntu. So we've not been able to achieve political unity with the African Union, as you've seen. Those are the failures, as I have said. One of the ways that we can move towards, now let's talk about how we can move towards our African unity. We are at 41. I'm trying to go the way forward. Or like Dr. King asked, where do we go from here? And let's give that answer. So we have to form and strengthen an African Union, a federated state of African nations, an alliance of African nations, whichever term you want to use it. Umoja wa Mataifa ya Nsi ya Ubuntu. Umoja wa Mataifa ya Nsi ya Ubuntu. The unity of the nations of Nsi Ya Ubuntu. That is what we must create. Like we said, it is important that through that unity, we have political integration. You can't go be acting the way you want politically over there and over here. Even in the United States, when the states have attempted to do so, we've seen how they cause disruption in their unity. So even in the United States, if you study, by the way, it's good to study your enemies. When the states have attempted to not listen to the federation and align with the federal rules, you have seen the failure that they have introduced in their unity. So political cohesion, political integration is important. Economic collaboration. So if we agree under this federation, this is how we're going to operate economically, no one in the 54 nations should go doing whatever they want to do. It is going to be the agreed upon standards. And now you can tailor them to your local areas. But this is the grounding policy of how we move forward economically. Number one, you're not going to sell African land to foreign nations. That is a no negotiation, none at all. Why do people need land? Shelter. We don't want them to shelter there. Unless it's really bad in the West, and if they shelter, it's going to be under our own terms, right? Food, production of food. We will produce the food. We'll be sure to export it to you. We will produce it. We know how to produce it. We got you, right? If food is your need, we'll send it to you. And guess what? We, unlike you, are not going to poison the food that we're sending to you. So just sit back, chill. But guess what? As you sit back and chill, make the money that you're going to need to pay for the food that we export to you. So don't close your eyes or forget that you actually need to pay for the food that we're going to export to you. Economic collaboration, collective defense and security. This one, Africans, WanaUbuntu, you tend to shy away from it, but it's important. If we build a united and federated Nsi Ya Ubuntu, we have to protect it. We have to defend it. And so for you, and by the way, this includes an intelligence unit to continue collecting intelligence 24/7. And by the way, in a setting where we are planning for, we are already preparing towards this African unity, it was asked of me, how does defense apply to the individual? Because we want to give individuals ownership of community well-being, right? So how do you make defense and security relatable to the individual? All of you, WanaUbuntu, are going to be spies. All of you, yes, we're going to call it, we're going to own it. We have no business shying away from these words. No, we are going to all be spies individually for the sake of our well-being collectively. All of us. So anything you hear that is anti-you, you will report it. You will report it to the powers that be, to the people who have taken the positions of leadership, to the people who are assigned and equipped to do something about it. That is what defense and security looks at, like, to the individual. When you see danger, you're going to yell danger where it needs to be yelled at so that something can be done about it. That is our individual responsibility when it comes to African unity. Cultural unity and Afrocentrism. So we're going to agree that Afrocentrism is our united way of being, right? It doesn't mean that your Yoruba culture is taken for granted. It doesn't mean that my Kamba culture is taken for granted. But guess whose responsibility it's going to be to make sure that on top of us embracing and acknowledging that the Yoruba people are a people of these 54 nations of the Federation of African Nations, and acknowledging every tribe on Nsi Ya Ubuntu, be it small. I've had people talking about my people, my tribe is a minority tribe. There's no such thing. Whether you're small or big, you are a tribe of Nsi Ya Ubuntu. Enough with this Western language of majority, minority, as far as whether you deserve to be acknowledged or not. Let's be very keen, because when we come to inequity, then we need to be careful about that, because that's the only way we indict and that's the only way we heal. So language it can shift based on the need at the moment. And our need is to unite. So we unite and honor all nations, the structures that were created by the colonialists, that nation, but even smaller, the nations that are known as tribes, the Kamba nation, the Kikuyu nation, the Tswana nation, right? The Nguni peoples with the different nations within it, the Yoruba nation, the Igbo nation, right? And by the way, I just got distracted right there between the Yoruba and the Igbo, because I was recently reading part of their history, which is horrible. The things that have been used, like what we have done to each other under this possession. We've been possessed by Western mentality under that divisive tactics that they use, what we've done to each other. So we must move away from that history. We must move away from, if we're going to actually unite, we must forgive past harms, but not forgive blindly. The Yoruba people will have to actually acknowledge their role in what they did to the Igbo people. So these are the things we're talking about. And then cultural unity. The other part of cultural unity is the language, right? We need to decide that, and this actually was shown in real time. Earlier this week, I attended a meeting, or last week, I attended a meeting on African linguistics with fellow WanaUbuntu linguists. And the lady was, a lot of the people, because it was hosted, it was mostly West African, was speaking Yoruba, I believe it was. No. We were focusing on Igbo culture and the Igbo language. And at one point, someone says, I wish we had a language we could all speak. And I was sitting there, and you know me, I'm not going to hesitate. I put it in the chat. Ubuntu. It is our language of unity. You all need to learn it. We do have that language. Learn it, teach it. Start speaking, start being comfortable with it, embrace it. It is our language of unity, and it will give us more power. In the simplest, petty way, I was hanging out with a friend recently, and I wanted to say something about non-Ubuntu people that were around us. If that friend spoke Ubuntu, I would have straight up right there, as if I was talking about the weather, been like, da 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 da. So that's the petty advantage right? But still an advantage that you can speak and no one else will understand what you're saying. But also whether they understand or not, because a lot of them are learning the language, whether they understand or not, it is ours. It is ours, and there's pride in embracing and using what is yours, other than using the colonial languages. So we have to nationalize solutions. We have to nationalize key industries, right? Natural resources nationalized. There's no ifs and buts, right? There's no private entity that will operate to get natural resources from our ground, from our motherland. No, it is going to be nationalized. So the nations are going to, under the agreed terms of the federation, negotiate how you're going to access natural resources. And you're going to pay the prices that have been agreed upon under the federated union. State-led development, right? The state is going to have to take ownership of infrastructure, of building within their own nations and ensuring, for example, Kenya, we recently had flooding, and many other Nsi Ya Ubuntu nations. The state is going to be responsible, and we're going to hold them accountable. There will be structures in our governance that will hold them accountable. If you have been elected to be in leadership and we're noticing you have not put in infrastructure, not even started in a year, you're out. Forget about what terms we like. When we talk about the term of the leader, I'm intentionally not calling president for now. So in case we decide we're going to call them something else. But if we decide that the terms or the length, the term length, right, of leadership of a leader is 5 years, they're going to be caveats, right? They're going to be conditionalities. Africans are not ashamed of embracing conditionalities from the IMF. I'm asking you to embrace them for our unity. So if you are in our development, if you are a leader and in a year you have not done the development, forget about promises. We're talking about we collectively analyze what the nation needs, including the Wananchi, the people, the owners of the nation, Wananchi, the children of the nation, including them. There will be an analysis of what Kenya needs today to develop. There will be an agreement of what solutions should be taken to develop us. And then whoever is chosen for leadership will comply without question. You will just comply to implement. We will make sure you have the resources, MPs, experts, Wananchi, some of the Wananchi, to help you implement. And in 1 year, if you have not started the projects and implemented the processes that are going to move us to do whatever has been agreed, you will have to step down. This is what we're talking about. We have to start moving in a very serious way towards liberation and sustaining that liberation, not just achieving it, but sustaining it. The governance must be Afrocentric, like we mentioned before. It must be Afrocentric. We're going to follow our common way of Ubuntu, right? I am because you are, which then goes back to you as Kenya cannot be operating in a separate way than Namibia as far as interacting with the outside. As far as your people, you can. But also even with your people, when it comes to, let's embrace human rights for a minute. When it comes to human rights and how you should treat a human being, if Namibia notices Kenya is mistreating its human beings, they will be brought to the federation and they will be answerable and they will have to repair the harm that they have caused. That Kenyan leader. And before even it's brought to the federation, the Kenyan people will have the right to hold that leader accountable. And whatever African-centered structure they have put together, like a council of elders, the leader will be presented in front of that council of elders and they'll be answerable. They will have to repair. So we have a lot of work to do. I'm going to touch on the language quickly before we close. The importance of the language. Like I said before, there was a petty way of, and please ask any questions. And I thank you all for participating in the chat. Masanka and Zambi Kabea, Sinovia Indigo, Michael Bakwesea. Good to see you all in the chat. Asanteni kwa kuwa nasi. Zinavanefi. See, you all choose these names that are not really names, and I'm going to call them, I guess, just to acknowledge you. But I appreciate you all participating in the chat. Asanteni. So, what does the language of unity help us with, right? It serves as a unifying medium. That's the obvious benefit. breaking down language barriers. I told you we were in a meeting earlier this week. We were focusing on Igbo. People were speaking in Igbo. We had a couple of people calling in speaking in Igbo. And someone said, I wish we had a language we could all understand. So if we all learn Ubuntu, these are linguists too, so they should be leading. They should be leading this movement of unifying our tongues, right, in our African language, Ubuntu, erroneously known as Kiswahili. So it will reduce the barriers, will break down the language barriers and promote communication among diverse African nations, right? It will strengthen our African identity. We will be going in our unity, speaking our language, right? You go to Germany, they speak German, and you're supposed to comply. You're supposed to be the one who does your homework to understand what they're saying. So when these people come to our lands, they will have to get the resources or use our resources to get interpreters. So having a unified language that everyone, include those who were removed forcefully from our motherland, can speak, will be a way that you can see yourself as one, no matter where you are globally. You speak my language. You know how many times I'll explain to you all how this works. When I first came to the United States more than 20 years ago, we would be walking in the mall and then you see Kenya, like, so me and my cousins were in the mall and we're talking, and we go from Kikamba to Ubuntu, right? We'll be talking Kikamba and Ubuntu is coming in. We don't talk just one all the way. And then we'll see a Kenyan and we'll be like, oh, yes, that's a Kenyan, da, 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 da. And B, because I'm outgoing, usually a lot of times I would say hello. Just to hear that answer back in the language is so, in a foreign land especially, is so grounding in safety and oneness with that person. I don't know why we are pushing away, like why we are pushing against it. The idea that we should build a language that unifies us. And then it eases trade and cooperation, which is how the language is formed originally. The nations that meet in the eastern area of Nsi Ya Ubuntu, otherwise known as East Africa, they build this language so that they can unite in communication while they are trading, so that they all understand what they're saying. And if you notice, the evidence again is in the language. And just like, why am I forgetting? A few weeks ago, we had a session, and I am so sorry. Robin Walker, I believe, was our brother who joined us. Correct me if I'm wrong, the guest was Robin Walker. And he told us that, and I suspected this for a long time, the place where the culture is purest is Bakongo, is Congo. Bakongo are the people, is Congo. And I suspected for a long time now that the place where Ubuntu is purest is Congo. And I was happy when he confirmed that. The place where our culture is purest, like has the least infection, is Congo. And it is very fitting because Nkrumah was one of the people who said that Congo is going to be the center of our liberation. It will be the center of our liberation. And now I'm going to throw in Congo and Haiti just because of the historical significance. Haiti being the first WanaUbuntu who were forcefully removed from our motherland to fight against imperialism and colonialism. So that is the center of our liberation. As long as you all are ignoring the liberation of Congo, none of us is going to be liberated. And so we might as well collectively focus on starting there. Focus on reaching back there. Start from the center outward, right? And by the way, I said this in a Kenyan space the other day. Me saying that does not mean that stop working outside. I'm asking you because I know you're African, you're WanaUbuntu, you're capable, you're able, you can multitask. Do that while doing this. But we cannot ignore this. All right, so it will ease in trade and cooperation. It will promote Afrocentric education. We will base our education. Tanzania did this for years, and I think they're still doing it. Everything was taught in Ubuntu, including chemistry, math, everything. And you have brilliant people who've come out of Tanzania. Brilliant economist, Abdul Rahman Mohamed Babu. People who they open their mouth and you see they're speaking wisdom, Nyerere. and their education of chemistry, of math, of everything was in Ubuntu. So let's not diminish the value of our language. I'm going to stop there because we are at the hour. I had a few people who requested that we reduce the lectures to 30 minutes. Again, I'm not going to reduce the lectures in 30 minutes. As you can see, the hour itself is not enough to cover everything. But what I will do is I will make time to cut clips that are shorter so that you can watch short parts of it. This person was asking not for themselves, but for the younger generation that needs to hear this information. And let me quickly look at the chat and see if there are any questions before we close. And by the way, join our Telegram. I'm going to put the information out as a post on Kumbukeni. Join as a member. I don't know if you have to pay to join as a member. Just let me know if it requests you to pay. But join as a free member, or whether you have to pay. Join as a member so that you get my posts. So immediately, the 27 of you who are here, I can see on YouTube. I don't know how many people are on Twitter. Let's see how many people are on Twitter. If there are people at all. The 20 who are on Twitter, go ahead now and let me mute that Twitter so that you're not hearing it. Go ahead now and subscribe to the Kumbukeni YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Kumbukeni1. But because these wakoloni, these wabeberu, Mzungu is shutting us down, we must make sure that we are in all spaces. So we're building a Telegram community, but we're also going to build communities in other spaces. And I have shared other spaces with you all that are coming up. But by December, at least we should have a concrete determination of which African space we're going to be supporting, where we can all move. In the meantime, look out for that post announcing our Telegram community. Join it. If you're a Mzungu who decides to slide in there, don't bring your white fragility, because I can't 100% vet who gets in there. If you're a Mzungu who slides into our Telegram community, do not bring your white fragility. I'm telling you, I do not hold back as far as putting you in your place, because you've gotten away for too long with your nonsense of white supremacy. And I know that you're not superior to us because I have lived amongst you. I have seen you all walking barefoot in the bathroom, which is very disgusting. So you're not superior to me because you should have thought, and now I'm being petty, but petty for a reason. You should have thought to yourself, if you are a superior being that is civilizing me, that you're going to get infections if you walk into the bathroom barefoot. So just because you're a Mzungu does not make you superior. I've seen a lot of you who don't even know how to read and write, and you have big jobs paying you big money. I'm not saying this to disgrace the whole community of Wazungu. I'm saying this to call bullshit on the notion, the false notion that white is superior and we are inferior. All right? I wish you all the best. Kila la heri. Usiku mwema kwa wale ambao mko nyumbani. A good day to those of you who are not home. Siku njema kwa wale ambao sio usiku mliopo. Asanteni. Siku njema. Kila la heri. Kwaherini.